So today, guys, I want to be talking about, just my life. That's what you all come here to listen to, right? No, but preparing for this sermon, I was thinking about, just growing up. And recently, I got together with some old high school friends, and we just, talked about life, where we've all been. And I just got to thinking that no one really prepared me for adulthood, right? And that's what all of us, young adults think, even though our parents disagree completely. But that's what I'm thinking. No one prepared me for adulthood. It just came one day and just decided that it was there, and, like bills. I knew there were bills, and I knew there were important bills, but I didn't know how many bills there were. There's bills and fees and hidden fees for this and that, and I'm just trying to make my own way in life. And the responsibilities that come with this early adulthood. I got to go to school, I got to find a job, I got to work, I got to provide for myself, I have to, pay these bills, I have to do all these things. And one of the hardest ones that I've, came across, coming into adulthood, no one prepared me that I was going to have to feed myself 3 meals a day, every day, for the rest of my life. That's just crazy. No one prepared me for these things. I'm just scared for all these things that we have coming into adulthood. Today we're going to be talking about a young shepherd boy named David. Now, many of you might know this story, but to get to David, we have to talk about who was there before David. So the people of Israel wanted a king. We had generals who led, and these people were getting tired of these generals, and so they asked God for a king. And so a king is what God gave them. And so enter King Saul, who had favor with God, and he was a great king, and he did many things in the name of the Lord. But later on, in being a king, he started turning away from the Lord. His favor started turning away from that of God's favor. And so God came to Samuel and said, I regret making Saul king. Fill up your horn with oil and go to the house of Jesse in Bethlehem. And so God is calling Samuel to go anoint a new king. And so Samuel is scared at first because he doesn't want King Saul to find out, but he obeys God and he starts to go to Bethlehem. And here he finds the house of Jesse, and Jesse has 7 sons there. And Samuel sees one and he's like, that's the one. That's the one you called me for, Lord. He's handsome, he's strong. And God's like, that's not him. He's not the one. And so Samuel's confused, and he asks Jesse, is this all of your sons? And Jesse replies, no, there's one out taking care of the sheep. And so David comes, and God's like, he's the one. He is the next king. So Samuel anoints David to be the next king. David is a scrawny little boy who's just taking care of the sheep. He was looked over upon at first. He is a shepherd, but he is called to be the next king. And so now he can't just be king right away. This isn't going to happen overnight, but he will be the next king. So until then, King Saul is still in charge. And King Saul is going to war against the Palestinians. He declared war against them. And so David wasn't even old enough to join the army, but his 3 older brothers were. 3 of his older brothers were. And so they joined King Saul's army. And now, when you guys think of armies, they're a little different at that time. There was, different classes of what you kind of went into. It kind of talked about King Saul's army being a lot of infantrymen, just swords and armor. And that is kind of what his brothers were. But he was too young to join the army, and so he still took care of his father's sheep. Well, Jesse, he wanted to make sure his sons were all right in this war. He was scared for them, as I think all of us would be if our sons were out there. And Jesse was getting too old to make the trip to go check on them, and so he asks David if he would go and make that trip. And so David rose early with the sun the next morning like he would to go tend his sheep, but instead he took some bread to his brothers. And so on his way to meeting his brothers and check up on them, he heard the shout from this war site. See, now these wars were fought a little differently back then. They weren't always every man running at each other, but a lot of the times it was a champion versus a champion. And that is what was going on here. So David didn't know about this because David was, tending the sheep, but he found out when he got there. There was a Palestinian champion who for 40 days woke up and challenged the people of Israel to send one man to fight our champion and your champion. David didn't know about this until he got there and he heard this shouting. And so at the time, no one wanted to fight this other champion that woke up for 40 days straight and asked someone to fight him. Many of us on the Israelite side were scared. King Saul, who is supposed to be the leader, never even wanted to fight him either. Instead, he sent incentives out saying, you can marry my daughter, you can never pay taxes again, and I will give you extreme wealth if someone fights. So you're wondering why is everyone so scared to fight? Well, as many of you know, this champion, his name was Goliath. Now, if you don't know about Goliath, he was a giant. Now, we don't know specific details about his height because we don't measure in the ways that they measured. But a lot of sources come out and say he's between 8 feet and 9.5 feet, which is very tall. And I'll be honest, when I first read that, I was very skeptical. I was like, how can someone be that tall and that strong? But there's recorded history of people in our world being 9 foot tall. One name was Robert Wadlow. He's the tallest person ever recorded in our history, and he stands at 9 feet tall. And so there's this huge giant begging someone to fight him for 40 days straight. Standing around 9 feet tall. He had armor on him that could have weighed up to 125 pounds of bronze. The spear he held was 3 inches in diameter and weighed 15 pounds on the tip. It was a huge spear. And he had this amazingly looking helmet that struck fear in everyone. That's crazy tall, guys. Just think about it. You're just standing here. There's that 9 foot giant who wants to fight, who wants to kill, and standing in armor that's protecting him everywhere. Now, don't get me wrong. I would love to play basketball with Goliath. I think we would have been a great team. I wouldn't have done much, though. But scientifically, it is said to believe that Goliath had a pituitary gland. He had on his pituitary gland, he had a benign tumor, is what it's said to have, what caused him to be so tall. And that's what caused a lot of these giants. Robert Wadlow, that is what caused him to be 9 foot tall. And it is said to believe that Goliath had this benign tumor growing against his pituitary gland, which made him so big and so strong. Goliath was the champion. Now that's a huge problem for everyone that faced him. What's our Goliath? That was the biggest problem standing in front of the Israelites at the time. This 9 foot tall man with 200 pounds worth of equipment standing between them and victory. What is our Goliath? I'm going to be vulnerable with you guys here because I think you deserve that. I've struggled throughout my life with this idea of abandonment. My mom was 16 when she had my older sister, and she was 18 when she had me, and my father walked out when I was under 2 years old. I haven't talked to him since. This idea of abandonment, it stuck with me for a very, very long time. He left because he was into drugs. He left because he got caught. He went to prison. And I thought, for a long time, that's why. That's what's keeping us between each other. And then I found out he's been out for multiple years. And so this sense of abandonment just haunted over me through my young childhood. And then a few years back, I proposed to my girlfriend at the time, now my wife. And a few weeks later, I found out my stepdad and my mom were getting a divorce. And they split up. I don't really talk to either of them that much. So this idea of abandonment has followed me. As a lot of you might know, I go to MCC. I'm in a counseling class, and we talk about these things, and we counsel each other, and abandonment has been something I've been scared to talk about. It is my Goliath. I don't know what to do, but I'm working on it. What is your Goliath? What is that thing standing in between you and victory? Now, Seth talked about Job and Jonah recently and all the things that came upon them. These were things that were standing in front of them. What is your fish? Who is your accuser? What is your Goliath? Mine is that struggle with abandonment, that struggle with accepting people, that struggle of letting people in. Now, our Goliath is something that we have to face. It's the thing that is in front of us. No one on this earth can face that battle for us. What is your Goliath? Now, I bet that you guys have all heard the story of David and Goliath at some point in your life. The Goliath is that huge champion, and David is this incredible underdog, right? But I think if we dig a little deeper, a little more can be revealed. Like I said, at this time, war was fought a little differently. There were 3 types of fighters back then. There was the infantry, who were the people with the tunic armors, the helmets on, the swords, and they were just hand-to-hand close combat. That was the infantry at the time. And like I mentioned earlier, a majority of King Saul's army was infantry. Most likely all of it was, other than King Saul and his son Jonathan. They were infantry. Now, another type was the cavalry, which had a chariot, and it had one man manning the chariot and one person in the back fighting. So it was a two-man operation. And so these guys were really good in the big battles that don't happen that much, but they were very good there because if one side of your army was losing, you could send these chariots super fast to get over there and help with reinforcements. And so these were very good at the time to help with this big, battles. But the last type of warrior were the slingers. Now, this is my favorite. I've always loved swords growing up, but something about projectiles I love. I'm not sure why. But I did research over it, and I love doing research over it. But scientists did an experiment not recently, but the last 10 years, where they had these slings and they were, using them the way that they're properly supposed to use. They're not slingshots, but they're little slings that But it is said that these rocks could be slung over 100 miles per hour. I don't know how many of you guys had siblings growing up, but I threw rocks at my siblings, and my siblings threw rocks at me. And even those 20-mile-per-hour rocks, those hurt. These slings sent these rocks out at around 100 miles per hour. And if after a lot of practice, these people learned to be able to shoot at around 200 feet pretty accurately at a standstill target. 100-mile-per-hour rock at around 200 feet. I just love the projectile talk. But this was the third type of warrior at the time. And recent medical professors say that these rocks could destroy the bones without breaking the skin. It is like, with these three types of fighters, it was like one big game of rock, paper, scissors. Infantry being the big, armored-up rock, the cavalry being the scissors, and these guys with slings being paper. The little old paper defeats the rock, as we all know. This is how David could defeat Goliath. Now, when David came to defeat Goliath, though, his first option wasn't to go out there with a sling and be like, I'm going to win this. No, when he decided he was going to fight Goliath, King Saul took off his armor and gave it to David and put this infantry armor on him and gave him a sword. See, now this is where we live into the expectations of the world. We're fighting this Goliath, but we're doing it with the things that the world is trying to give us. How many times do we fight our problems in life with that of our own way? No, God, I'm not going to do what you're saying. I'm going to do it the way I think I can fix it. I'm going to slay my Goliath with the ways that I know how. How often do we do that in our life? Or the expectations of someone else. As I mentioned earlier, our Goliaths are our Goliaths. Someone else can't step in and bring the sword and strike down Goliath. And the expectations of others, or the expectations of ourselves. We can't just snap our fingers and the problems just go away. Goliath was there for 40 days demanding someone to fight him. Our Goliaths are always there too. We need to fight them, not with the expectations of ourselves. So what did David do? David said, no, this armor isn't me. Why is the armor not him? Samuel went to go anoint a king, and David was a shepherd boy out in the field with a sling to defend his flock. David wasn't this huge infantry soldier that is going to strike down this 9-foot giant in front of him. God chose him because of the way he was and the tools that God has already given him. And now I want to bring back up that pituitary gland tumor. So it is also said that this tumor can affect the eyesight of the person. It gives them huge strength, makes them very tall, but it can affect their eyesight. See, Goliath might have been this huge man, an amazing fighter, but is said to believe that he could not see very well. 1 Samuel, there's a line in 1 Samuel around, I think, 43, 44, and it says, "Who are you that you come at me with sticks?" That is what Goliath is saying to David. He's coming at him with a staff and a sling. He also had a shield bearer in front of him, Goliath did. Now, why would a man wearing 125 pounds of armor need someone to stand in front of him? Well, it is believed that he was there to help him see, help him be his eyes. And so, who are you that you come at me with sticks? Goliath was an amazing warrior, a champion even, who thought that David was coming at him with sticks, which is said to believe a sword and a staff. David took down Goliath not because he was the underdog, but because he used the weapons that God provided him with. He chose to lean into God. God chose him because he was a shepherd boy who took care of his flock with his sling. And so the fight started, and Goliath came forward, and he took off his helmet, and David sent a rock through his skull. And then David took Goliath's sword and cut his head off. David won because he didn't turn to the expectations of the world. He didn't put on the armor of King Saul and go into this fight thinking he would win in the way that the world wants him to win, in the way that this army wants him to win. But he turned to the ways that God has showed him. We all have Goliaths in our life. Think about your Goliath. They're all big problems. They're all our big problems that all need conquered. But we can't take down the Goliath by conforming to the expectations of the world, but instead turning to God and looking at the tools that he's provided for us. So it's said that this is a great underdog story, but it's a story of when God puts something in front of us, we lean towards God. Just like what Seth talked about in Jonah and Job. To lean into the Lord at these times. Our Goliaths are scary. but they're the things in between us and victory. Lean in towards God. Use the tools that He has provided. Use the tools that He has helped you with in your life. And lean into Him. If you'll please bow your head in prayer with me. Lord Almighty, there's so much going on in this world. We all have so much going on in our own worlds. But Lord, I just pray that we lean into you. Lord, I pray that we turn to you and not away. Put your hand on us, Lord. Give us the strength that we need. Be with all of us, Lord. Lord, I just pray that you open our eyes. You help us not to conform to the expectations of this world, but conform to you. In all your name, we pray. Amen.